up again. So you've got those closed loop, so you're constantly learning. Number 6, strategy is super important, but without delivery, strategy is useless. So you need to have strategy and delivery, but in order to deliver, have that really high-performing delivery engine, you need teams. So delivery is about teams, and that's the atomic unit of the organization. That's the most important thing. But actually, to have those teams, you need to have people working together. Number 7, to get those people who are collaborating, working together, that they need to be motivated. 2 concepts here. Drive, great book by Dan Pink, talks about having autonomy, purpose, and mastery to actually motivate people, intrinsic motivation. But you also need psychological safety. Check out Amy Edmondson and Google's Aristotle Project for more on that. Number 8, shape and the size of the team matters. I've got this wrong. I've worked in teams that are 20 people strong. The communication overhead and the orchestration becomes too much. You want to keep the teams to 15 or less, making sure they come from different backgrounds, they're multidisciplinary, multifunctional, and the polyskilled, so they can they can help each other do their roles. Dependencies are the enemy of speed, so you want to continuously work to eradicate handoffs and dependencies. If you think about waterfall, each handoff is a point of friction. So for high-performing teams, you want to eliminate those frictions. You want everyone collaborating together. You want to be deliberate about, intentional about how you're designing those teams. Number 10. I've already mentioned polyskilled people, and that is people who can have many different specialisms, different depths, but also have that broad knowledge so they can really collaborate, understand each other's points of views, and get the best outcomes. It's what you call broken comb, or Kent Beck called paint drip shaped people. Number 11, bit counterintuitive this one, but stop starting to start finishing. I see lots of organizations starting new work, they think they're progressing, but actually they're creating more WIP. And therefore, if you look at theory constraints, it actually slows everything else down. So be clear about what is your number 1 priority. And you can see here on the right, actually, it's more important to prioritize rather than just starting new initiatives. On prioritization, number 12, ruthlessly prioritize, always focus on the economics. So you want a stacked ranked list, not buckets, Moscow, must, should, could, have, would have. You want them stacked ranked, and you want to be clear about what is that 20% that delivers 80% of your value. Couple of good techniques to do that is weighted shortest job first, WSJIF, or COD, cost of delay. Number 13, always make the model and your relationships between your metrics that articulate your return on investment visible. Lots of different things to consider. There's tension between them. They have a knock-on impact. So make your thinking clear and visible, monitor these things, and look to improve them. Number 14, always share context when making and sharing decisions. So I've done this badly and not done that, and then it comes to bite you because people are asking why and thinking of different ways of doing things. You need to share all the context, your industry, the market, the competitors, and make sure you put the customer at the heart of it when making decisions. Number 15, you might have heard of Marty Kagan talk about the 4 big risks: business viability, usability risk, value risk, and feasibility risk. And you need different people to come from different perspectives to make sure you're considering all these risks. You also, I talk about 5th big risk, the delivery risk. Lots of enterprise organizations have a lot of change management programs that need to consider these things. Number 16, get customers' feedback early and often. Don't wait until the end and do a big ta-da reveal moment. We're doing waterfall. Make sure you're agile, iterative and incremental. So test early with interviews, prototypes, use lean startup methodologies to get through the learning loop as quickly as possible. A good way of thinking about that is the truth curve by Gift Constable. On the y-axis here, you can see how much you bet, how confident you are, versus the x-axis, which is the level of effort. So you want to you want to stay in that safe zone where it's the reward is and the payoff is in balance. So increase confidence as cheap as possible, optimize for value. A good way of doing that is doing continuous discovery, dual track product development, been able to use a lot last few years, been made infamous by Jeff Patton and Marty Kagan. But it's all about doing continuous discovery and continuous delivery. So you're continuously experimenting, you're continuously testing, and you're always going to be shipping the product. Number 19, the penultimate one, more technical, on shipping the product. Continuously optimize your path to production, invest in that build pipeline. It's great if you want to start ideally moving towards continuous deployment if you're not already, but at least start with continuous integration and continuous delivery until you build that trust to move to continuous deployment. And number 20, last but very much not least, listen, stay humble, and be curious. You always want to have that active listening. You want to have a growth mindset, invite different perspectives, challenge your own beliefs, and don't jump to answers. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for your time and close. I hope you have enjoyed that Pecha. All right.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
Are we doing questions
Hi, everyone.
now?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So are we going to leave questions for the end, Andy? Thank you. So for a little introduction, I see quite a lot of people that know about Nationwide or are within Nationwide. So I won't cover too much about us. But as a financial institution, number one in mortgages in the UK and all the other good stuff, I hope you can appreciate the complexities of data in an organization like this. And my choice for Pecha today is to talk about agility and sustainability of the business, but from the point of view of our behaviors towards data. So it's not the traditional agile topic, but I hope at the end of this, you will be curious about this new perspective. So my idea was to describe to you how our means of production have changed over 1 or 2 generations and how little we have changed as human beings, apart from the engineers that made the means of production change so much, in terms of our behaviors towards generating and consuming data. So in my lifetime, in my professional lifetime, the price of storing 1 gigabyte of data has gone down from $1 million to a little fraction of a cent, which makes us really frivolous and careless and reckless in creating data. And why does it matter to enterprise agility and sustainability? That we have larger volumes to deal with, we have faster moving data, but we still think like we thought before. For example, supervising people, having manual controls like in the top right, and not getting data to speak to us about how the business is performing. And we probably think that there are lots of technologies that could help us stay in control and stay in control with fast moving data, higher volumes of data. But actually humans are part of the system. So you might throw quite a lot of process improvements and technologies that, unveil secrets of your business to you. But my provocation here is who in your organization looks after the culture, the practices, and what I call the data citizenship behaviors, the code of conduct towards use of data. And why is that important? To be nimble, adaptive, and sustainable, you need to know what your business vitals are. And I put here a few examples that I'm going to cover today, using behaviors today and behaviors that ideally promote agility and sustainability to get the business to thrive. And a word of caution, we are here because we self-selected to come and have this meetup. And we might have a lot of engineers, change agents, product owners, but this talk is about everybody that uses the solutions that you deploy. So instead of 100 engineers, think about 1 million users. So in terms of data accuracy, what does that mean? If I'm a salesperson that is stuck on a screen with a mandatory field and I don't have that content, can you please put yourself on mute if you're not speaking? Thank you. I might put a dummy value in that screen to go through to the next stage, not knowing what's going to blow up downstream, compliance, MIS, etc. So a good data citizen has the responsibility here to understand what are the implications of what they do upstream in terms of data accuracy, not just fulfill what the systems tell them to do. What about maintaining a sustainable business if you are an enterprise manager that only has visibility of the high volume part of your business? What happens to the MVPs and the pilots that got generated and managed manually because they didn't have enough volume? Those things are usually footnotes into the balance sheet, right? Inclusions and exclusions, because volume didn't matter at the time. So a good data citizen in this case has the right to demand robust automation of data pipelines. We cannot sustain parallel worlds of manual processes unless, of course, you don't want to be sustainable. Another aspect of behavior that is really quite common is imagine someone new walking into your organization, and how do you set up granular, precise access to data that they can or cannot see? Usually you clone somebody similar, right? The world is so complex and you give them coarse grain, application level access. But a good data citizen knows that if they are exposed to data they shouldn't, they are carrying a risk of data breach and a personal risk of being accused of a data breach. So they understand their responsibilities in demanding obfuscation and control at granular level. Another anomaly in behavior is that as citizens, we expect quite a lot of real-time response from our systems. But as managers of large organizations, we are managing with T+1, end of the week, end of the month, end of the quarter numbers. So if systems are working, but they are giving you data that is not complete, that is creating anomalies that only people can identify, this is a recipe for an unsustainable business. So data citizen, again, needs to demand applications to tell them about data anomalies, not just software working or not working. And at the beginning, I talked about storage and the cost of a gigabyte. And these two graphs just focus on the red circles. Yeah. In 2016, on the left, you see that we predicted 40 zettabytes of data accumulated globally in 2020. This number was close to 64 zettabytes, 50% more. What happens to us as data citizens in the organization? We keep creating them because, it's almost free. Remember the first slide? But I have to have, as a citizen, the obligation not to litter and clutter my business with unusable data, because that makes it harder to find and manage and control. And on that vein, the responsibility for archiving, the responsibility for disposing of data cannot be passed to someone else. I can't just be creating and then somebody in the back office will figure out how to store, how to delete, when to delete, is it compliant with policies, is it not. So a good data citizen is educated beyond policies and e-learning. A good data citizen understands the practice of cataloging, labeling, setting retention dates, and deleting what is no longer in the service of the enterprise of your customers, rather than somebody else's problem a few years down the line, maybe even a compliance violation. So I hope with these examples of behaviors before and after, potentially, you would feel curious about developing this code of conduct and a data citizenship culture in your organization. And at the very least, join me on the digitalcleanupday.org. You can go and register that and make a start on cleaning up most of the unused data that we have in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. So hello, I'm Anne Gambles. I work for the Open University. I'm a project manager, but I'm also a librarian. I'm based within library services within the OU, and I've worked there for a long time, for over 20 years. So yeah, here's my first slide. Okay, cool. So library services is within LDS, Learner and Discovery Services, and Islands in the Sky is a scenario-based futures planning methodology that's helpful in uncertain times. And we've used it in LDS to help us explore post-pandemic hybrid ways of working. The Open University was founded in 1969 and Europe's largest universities. Most OU students learn at a distance. Over half of the OU workforce has always worked remotely, but LDS were based, or indeed still are in a way, on our Milton Keynes campus and also in our warehouse. In the early pandemic, LDS was trying to work out the best way to collaboratively design how And we considered how we might experiment with methods and tools to deliver successful hybrid working models. And Matt Finch, a strategy and foresight practitioner, was recommended to us. Matt suggested Islands in the Sky. It's Matt's concept, and we worked with him to develop a prototype tool as a test and learn project. In phase 2, we further developed the Islands methodology in collaboration with Caink of Oxford University and his AZB Silver team, Brendan Fitzgerald and Zinzi Crest. So Islands in the Sky is based on the Oxford Scenario Planning Approach, or OSP, but it's simplified for rapid scenario planning. It's a situational awareness, scenario-based planning tool that's especially useful for managing uncertainty. Islands in the Sky can help with navigating uncertain futures and understanding social and transactional relationships. It asks you to think how to go beyond expectation and the things you currently anticipate to really see how the future could be different in ways that perhaps lay in your blind spot. Islands in the Sky asks you to focus on your transactional relationships against the backdrop of rapid change and uncertainty, and these are often described as tuna conditions. So taking a systems thinking approach to enable teams to develop their situational awareness and understand the context they're operating in to design a better future. So why Islands in the Sky? Well, the name itself is an invitation. When taking part in the process, there's an element of play and of make-believe and the foundations of imagined future contexts, because they won't be like yesterday, in the words of Matt Finch. So an overview of the approach. Islands in the Sky can help surface insights about future challenges and opportunities, create a space for creative discussion and fresh ideas regarding different possible futures to develop possible future strategies. And there are 5 simple stages. Stages 2 to 5 usually happen in a workshop. Stage 1 is all about clarifying your purpose, and a good start might be to review your current mission statement and then clarify what you're trying to imagine a different future for or of, perhaps using Simon Sinek's What's Your Why approach. So in LDS, we used Alexa Cambon's provocation to shape our thinking on designing hybrid working. If 9 to 5 had never been invented, if office were a foreign term, if the concept of a meeting sounded like gibberish, in short, if today were day 1 in the history of work, how would you design how you work? Stage 2 involves mapping your transactional environment, the island that you inhabit. You capture all the entities you interact with directly as you carry out your work and all the internal and external relationships involved in your mission. And you understand as best you can the various needs and perspectives. Stage 3 considers relationships and the social and functional value generated by parties and labels these with the value that is generated. It asks, what difference does each relationship make in each direction? Stage 4 identifies the uncertainties that are washing up on the shores that shape and drive decisions made by the entities on the island. It looks at which factors beyond our own direct control shape decisions, and such factors could affect just one actor or many, perhaps. So you can consider what factors or forces that you can't fully predict in advance might be, and how they might redraw the map of the island. And then multiple islands and scenarios can then be sketched out to explore how different combinations of factors might wash ashore and redraw the map of relationships in the future. And in the final part of the workshop, you review your island or islands, consider the implications, opportunities and challenges. So if this future came to pass, what would be the wisest choices for us to make today? And then based on that, based on your learnings, you can decide on your options, like what you're going to do next. So here are some highlights from our phase 1 pilot. And I'm just going to say that, yeah, I'll talk to the middle one. The team recognised the need to broaden conversations beyond the original remit to incorporate broader understandings of the working environment, including culture and mindset, policies, and other structural aspects. Futures planning is an ongoing process. In collaboration with AZB Silver, we've developed the Islands in the Sky methodology and tool for a broader strategic context. We're embedding the Islands in the Sky approach within the OU in collaboration with our Change Champions Network. And we have a futures planning course that is in development to support hybrid learning and digital transformation in Wales. Sorry, hybrid working and digital transformation. So drawing on organisational legacy can help energise us for future endeavours. And personally, I think we will best transform to meet a future context through working in collaboration with other organisations. And at futures planning, ensuring a wide range of voices are heard, drawing on sooner, safer, happier, perhaps channeling some Erin Dignan, we can create a people positive, environmentally sustainable, complexity conscious environment that enables our people as individuals, teams and society as a whole to do their best work and to be the best they can be. Thank you for listening.
It's also from now on. Yeah. Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me? Sound check, sound. Okay, sound check. That sounds better. Yes, thank you. Yep. Thank you. Yes, awesome. So I'm going to say a little bit about why we need to reimagine risk and control, and then move on to some of the patterns and anti-patterns that I found and my colleagues have found in our experience to be very helpful when you are rethinking this process. Head of internal audit said to me, group minimum standards have not kept pace with new ways of working. A CIO said to me, our agile teams slow down to the same speed as everyone else when they hit the governance gates. A head of DevOps said to me, we have to modernize our SDLC to enable continuous delivery. And this is what you don't want to happen. Okay, this is Deepwater Horizon. The rig exploded in the Gulf of Mexico 12 years ago. And on the day it exploded, there were executives on that rig celebrating 7 years without any incidents, no fatalities. So was this a safe rig? That was the question the investigation asked. Or did it just look safe? There was a lack maybe of incident reporting because people were too scared to report incidents because of the milestones they needed to reach. Systemic weaknesses built up. The accident was far worse than it needed to have been. So culture matters. Key message from this slide, process is not going to save you with governance, risk and compliance. Culture is what matters. Data leaks are the new oil spills. If you're not in an oil company, that's fine. Cyber threats, regulatory compliance, accidental losses mean that risk management is critical. And I can't say it enough, having a great process will not keep you safe. Culture matters. So the first pattern I wanted to flag today is the need for psychological safety, as was mentioned earlier by Andy, within the domain of safety. By safety, I mean risk and control. So having psychological safety within that domain to have an open conversation about this, it may require a cultural program alongside any process improvement that you seek. Let's look then at your risk and control organization. It's typically siloed. You've got fraud, you've got information security. We heard about data and data privacy earlier. There's many others. And these teams have common problems. As the granularity of changes gets smaller and the pace of change gets faster, they start to break down. They start to not know how to engage. To enable your safety silos, to improve, pivot them into long-lived cross-functional safety teams. These teams have all the skills in them to advise a value stream about the risks that they may face. They are empowered to make risk judgments on behalf of that value stream. And by aligning your safety community, your risk and control community toward the value streams that you run, we find that you increase shared purpose. The value stream starts to understand the risks better. The risk teams understand the business better. You have shared purpose. You have customer alignment within the risk community, and you have better risk judgments. Okay, so we've talked about culture. We've talked about organization. You do need some kind of process help you manage this engagement effectively. I'm going to outline here an approach that's working at scale in a number of organizations. What you're looking at is a funnel on its side with some business outcomes in them, quarterly value outcomes. As soon as an outcome is prioritized for work, before it's elaborated, before there's detailed requirements, your product team is engaging with its aligned cross-functional long-lived safety team to triage, to talk about how much risk might this thing represent. Okay, that's the key outcome of this is the agreement of how regularly do we need to talk. It's a triage conversation. Through that continuous engagement on the topic of risk to support your continuous delivery, risks will be identified. They can be templated if possible in a risk catalog and pulled into the backlog. As soon as that risk work item has been addressed, it can be validated by the safety team. So you've got a continual flow of risk management in the flow of work of the teams. That continuous engagement enables confidence in the release process. It allows you to deliver at any cadence your continuous delivery process allows, providing that the risk stories that were flagged have been closed down in advance. It means there's no risk inspection governance needed at time of go live. We find this kind of approach needs to be supported by a standard. There are 23 different control points that I've identified so far that are auditable in that approach I've just described. We have this reflected in process standards such as this, and that can be a ninja move to help your organization understand that your governance colleagues and your audit colleagues are right behind and alongside the improvement to ways of working. You need to think about some tooling. There are some implications. When you rethink governance, risk and compliance, you're needing to connect business outcomes portfolio with work in Jira or your dev tools and with deployment in your ops tools. So biz DevOps matters. So to recap, I've described 3 patterns and anti-pattern pairs for improving risk and control in your organization. One is having psychological safety within your safety domains, which may need a cultural program. Another is organizing safety by value stream. And another is a minimum viable process, such as the lean control approach that I described. If you want to get started improving governance, risk and compliance, start small, as we heard earlier from Andy, and learn fast. Start with your leaders. You need to have the leadership sponsorship, both from your audit and safety domains and also from your delivery areas. Find the first team, the first product team that is an enthusiastic adopter of change. Start with one team, start with one safety team, and focus on helping those conversations become effective. So you might need to insert some coaching, add some coaching to really make those conversations work. The process that I described, you will need to modify, adapt to suit your context. So again, think of this as a continual improvement of your process. Start small, get some basic tooling in place. You can work off Excel to start with, but rapidly as you start to add product teams, as you want to add safety teams, you will need to think about adding to the tooling requirement. So that's a quick run through of what it takes, in my experience, to improve how you imagine governance, risk and compliance. Happy to take questions at the end.
So I'm next. It's always hard to go next after a great presentation, but I'm next. So my name is Zsolt Berend, and so nice to meet you all. And I'm a business agility coach, practitioner and trainer, working this brilliant society, nationwide building society. So, and the talk I'm gonna be talking about is actually about learning organizations. It's popping the information learning bubbles and how to create greater connectedness across an organization. And it's gonna be 2 aspects. So one, I'm gonna look into unlocking visibility. I'm gonna also be looking into patterns of popping the information learning bubbles. So first, let's take a big picture. I always hear that, let's take a big picture. So I took actually the biggest picture you can ever take. So this is the picture of the universe. You can't take bigger than that. Tell me if you can. And so what's interesting in this picture, not what you see, but what you don't see. Because 85% of the universe actually consists of unseen matter. And we can only observe indirectly by its gravitational influence. So we can't see that. So similarly, in an organization, often we see where work is, often we don't see where work isn't. So the handoffs, the queues, where it's waiting, work is waiting, we don't see that. So if in your chat, you could tell on average how many handoffs typically you have in your organization, that would be a really good data point. I love data. So the first thing we have to do, or first pattern, is actually creating and having connected data sets. So not just within your local team having the data, but also having a connected data set across the value creation chain. So end-to-end connectedness. The second pattern is this really need to be self-serve. Doesn't work otherwise. This is a huge enabler. So teams and individuals and team of teams, they need to be able to access the dashboard and then look for data instead of having a central team providing data on demand. And it needs to be based on invitation. So invite over inflict, taking the organization on the journey to be data-led. The mindset is always hard to change. Data mindset is even harder because we're not used to having access to data freely and using the data for continuous improvement. In order to achieve that, we need psychological safety. Otherwise, the data might be used as a stick and not for continuous improvement. It might be weaponized. There is a fear of revealing data. So to live that, we need to establish psychological safety for individuals and for teams. So this is what we did. This is nationwide. So actually, we really started with early innovators and early adopters and innovators. We're going to hear about, I think, the fusion of innovation a little bit later today. But also, we established a great feedback loop from the consumers. So consumers came to our show and tell, a regular show and tells bi-weekly, where they actually showed how they use the data instead of us talking about it. With that, we unlocked visibility. We unlocked visibility of flow of work, so end-to-end. So with that, we can tell difference between the local context and the end-to-end context. So where work isn't, what goes beyond the local context for teams. Equally relevant to unlocking measurability and visibility of alignment. So it's the vertical transparency. So how much is the team level work is aligned to the strategy, and vice versa, the strategy, how much is the strategy connected, what the teams are working on. This actually unlocked great conversations around the things we are working on, should we be working on that, and so on, so priorities. And also this is unlocked insights, not just at the team level, but team of team levels, around the visibility, around alignment, and around lots of good things around, for example, how frequently we are going into production. Information learning silos. So going back to the big picture, looking at the universe, this is one of my favorite quotes. I'm going to let you read it. So going from galactical affairs and problems with information bubbles, let's look at our organizations. So within our organization, we have information learning bubbles. And the reason why, because often silo mentality is being built within the teams. They keep it to themselves. The other thing is that because its discovery is limited, we just heard from the Proxima Centauri story. When people leave, then knowledge is lost forever. And then because of that, also there are duplication of work happening. So what are the things we can do? So there is an awesome book club running, for example, Nationwide by Andrew Woolford. And this is brilliant. And this is a lot of buzz, a lot of networking opportunity and learning, but also colleague-to-colleague sessions where the learning is internal, colleague to colleague. COPs, it's a huge enabler. Why? Because it's internal to the organization, it's voluntary, it's open to all, so that it's organic, and so people, colleagues can come together and actually co-create and learn from each other. the way it works, couple of patterns is the larger it becomes, you need chairs or co-chairs running it. We need a small set of co-contributors. And also it's quite relevant that it is treated not as a loosely coupled group meeting infrequently time to time, but actually you have a set of outcomes. And then you have a sponsor as well. And conference is one of my favorite. So you recognize link office or open space where the agenda is not predetermined, but the agenda is created by the people. So the right people who come along is the right people. Whatever happened is the right thing that happened. And when it's done, it is done. So, and another huge enabler, it is the awards. So actually, instead of just individual awards, which is also important, having team or team of teams or various so asking the question, how much have you improved outcomes in the last 12 months? And actually, when you do that, you're going to have a flood of nomination coming in, which can provide you with a rich set of information, networking opportunity, and learning opportunity. So these are a set of patterns, not necessarily comprehensive. A couple of them I not even touched on because those are deeper. But please take a look at those. And thank you so much for listening.
I'm told this is the cheat slide that has 40 seconds, not 20. So this is the introductory slide. So we will be talking about Nationwide's operating model, and it relates, you'll see some of the concepts of Zsolt's presentation repeated as well. We will be talking about it in two different contexts, that you've got organising the work. When we talk operating model, people always straight away think about org charts. We'll be talking about firstly organising the work, and then secondly we'll be talking about organising the people, and try and give a different lens to that than just the org chart as well. So those two things are important. That'll be the themes of the talk. And this is also a presentation just on what we have right now. So it's a snapshot in time. Come back to us in 6 months, it'll be a little bit different. I'm pretty sure I can guarantee that, but we will keep iterating and improving as we go. That's the intention of obviously everything we do. But by using this operating model for now, what we have been able to do is turn the lights on quite a lot of things and gain transparency over work. Important to note, and I'm not going to spend much time on it, that we had a vision for ways of working for quite a long time. The words for it have changed over time as different leaders have come and gone. The words have changed. The goals on the left have pretty much stayed the same, different words about it, and how we measure that has improved deliberately over time. So the first section we're going to talk about today is organising the work, because if we don't structure it, we can't measure it either. So none of those outcomes are going to be measurable. You won't know whether you made it better or worse. I love this picture, the golden thread and being outcome focused, two little buzzwords there, and it made its way into our corporate comms library. So that's my job done. So we're done there. First step we did was set up this golden thread that Zsolt mentioned briefly. This is about our change portfolio, to be frank. So it's focused on the change portfolio. How do we structure the work? And outcomes down to OKRs, well known, epics and stories, just like you would have in Jira. What we found very valuable was to provide some translation to traditional language. If you just come in there with OKR, rah, 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 drive everyone mad, trust us. But if we can provide some translation, what we found is that even if at first your outcome just smelt a lot like a project brief, it's not the end of the world. Even if your OKR at first smelled a lot like a milestone, that wasn't a problem either. By asking for that transparency, we were able to get, at least at the top of this golden thread, to 100% transparency quite quickly. Not necessarily perfect quality, but full transparency. The hack there was that we integrated that into our portfolio status reporting that everyone loves. And by making sure that the OKRs and the outcomes were the unit of reporting, we gained some transparency. Next goal, to get that down to team level. So, and looking at it from the team's perspective as good disciplined backlog management. And of course, I'm sure we all want 64,000 backlog items, but that is what we do have. And we do also have a single register of all of those. So we can see 57% of them are linked all the way up to the top. Now we've got our problem child, or the remaining work to be done, or opportunities. only 65% when you look back down the other way is linked up, which implies that 35% of people aren't even writing their stuff in the backlog. It's somewhere else in a spreadsheet or in a Gantt chart still. Everyone wants to know what's the tooling. We have used the Jira Portfolio, or it's now called Advanced Roadmaps plugin, which enables you to build that hierarchy explicitly in Jira. The advantage of that over all the other portfolio tools, it is visible to everyone. So every team member can expect to ask, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And be able to find the outcome, the organizational outcome for that. Only with that structure for the work are we meaningfully able to now organize the people and then overlay the two together. So we'll have a look now at how we've organized the people, the capacity of all of our teams, and how they're able to work together, which is obviously important. So here is, look at this as a hierarchy or a nested system, whichever you like. The outside box is our whole portfolio of work. Business lines and functions, we have a CIO for each of those. There's several CIOs, and they have a book of work to take care of. Inside that, we have value streams, a concept we've already mentioned today, and cross-functional product teams inside. Sometimes, and only by exception, we have a cross-cutting program. Usually it's associated with some problem that's, hit the top of the visibility and needs to be dealt with. But with that model, we're able to explicitly know where our cross-functional teams need to be and what capacity can be planned for the various books of work. The cross-functional team model in our case is not the line management of the organization. The line management is actually coming from a traditional, very functionally organized model. The hack here is we've used an ordinary, any of the PPM systems, any of the portfolio planning systems allow you to do resource management. Instead of resource managing them into projects, we've resource managed them into value streams. Everyone wants to know what's a value stream. So here's some examples. The important part is that there's lots of types. Some are around customer journeys, some are around colleague journeys, some are around one of the products you might sell, some are around a channel, especially a digital channel. We have some shared platforms. All of those are valid, and we have to take care with that design. How real is that from a resourcing point of view? When we turned the lights on, I was very pleasantly surprised to find that 90% of our people are in only one value stream. That's a good start. Inside that, how often they context switch between the cross-functional teams, that's perhaps another question. Some of our teams have been able to demonstrate that they really have stabilized their teams very nicely. Our funding obviously has to be important. With this model, you're talking about real money, not wooden dollars or pounds, because you're actually aligning the budgets to where the capacity is. So where the people work, that's what you're funding. You're not funding an ethereal project construct, and that's been important. Here's how those two concepts overlay. The work, that's the golden thread overlaid over the top of the organization of the people. And by making both of those things explicit, only by making both those things explicit is delegated accountability actually possible. Otherwise, someone's going to say, who's working on such and such an objective milestone project, whatever they want to call it. You need that visibility. Here's what we have inside our value streams right now. Now, if you look at the elements of this, it's not all that different to a change program. It's just that it's going to live for a long time. It's designed to be a long-lived construct. It has its funding, it has its outcomes, it's got teams, it's off doing work. But what would make it a real and more deep part of our organization is when we bring in our processes, our data, and our applications, and we can see the mapping through to the value stream there. And we're on the journey of doing that. And then that means that now that value stream can really function in the long term across all of those functions and be able to continue to deliver value. So that's the state of the nation as we are right now in our operating model. And if anyone wants to reach out to have a sort of a peer-to-peer conversation about how that's working for yourselves, if you're on a similar journey, that would be most welcome.
What was this, my 40 seconds? Thanks, Tony. Thanks to all the other fantastic speakers. Hope everyone can hear me. There was a lot of insight. It's been a lot of insight, a lot of instruction, a lot of really good ideas. And I think now you're about to be introduced to Matt Turner, the clown's trousers, for a bit of light relief. This isn't necessarily going to give you any answers. I'm just hoping that it might show you that there are some quite interesting and often ridiculously funny questions that might be asked. in terms of agile transformation. So the BS that we're all full of is not what you're probably thinking, but it's behavioral science. So if we're practicing agile transformations, we are actually full of behavioral science and behavioral economics, in trying to get people to work together and change their behavior and so on. It's all about behavior. People are the answer to and cause of most of our problems. So how they change their behavior is what it's all about. I'll be talking about a few things: ideas, our relationship with ideas, our relationship with good ideas and bad ideas, how ideas represent value, binary thing about value. Ideas lead to value, often growth, but also I'll be talking about anti-growth, intangible and perceived value as well. So let's start with complexity. What I would say is, in agility nowadays, we often fetishize complexity. But I would say one of my favorite behavioral scientists, marketeer and salesperson, Rory Sutherland, talks about behavioral science as a gateway drug to complexity theory. I like gateway drugs, you know. I like a bottle of wine rather than the hard stuff. So that's where I sort of try and stay. The other sort of marketeer that I'd talk about is David Ogilvie. David Ogilvie once said, don't ask people anything, they're daft. People don't think what they feel, they don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say. But I think from agilists, actually, we look at it the other way, study them. Look at why these things are happening when they're saying different stuff. Because it's really, really messy. Has anyone seen this, the Cognitive Bias Codex? I show this to loads of people. I've got several copies of it myself. You can't really read that, but look at all those things that are going around the brain. Those are all the cognitive biases that make how we react to things really, really messy. What else makes what we're doing messy? Well, when you're thinking about inside very authoritarian command and control organizations, and there's lots of preference falsification. People will not tell you what they actually feel. So we've got to try and get them to open up and start sharing what's in their heads. Other things that make it messy as well are things like physics envy. So what we often feel like is when we're describing what we're doing to other people, we want to make it really, really scientific. Now, in agility, we talk about empirical evidence and the scientific method and all that sort of stuff, but we can lean over too much into it, and we can start to think that 1 and 1 always equals 2, and it doesn't. And here are some examples of why that's not. So things such as in South Africa a little while ago, KFC had a failing product. Management wanted to discount the product so that they would sell more and make more money. And surely that's the logical way, because 1 + 1 = 2, and that's what you do, discount to sell more. Well, no, actually the marketeers put the price up, and then people thought it was a luxury and started buying it in droves. In Canada, in the last decade, sales of shreddies absolutely dumped into the ground. So some bright spark came up with the idea of making diamond shreddies. Just turned it on its side. There's no real difference in that, but is it intrinsic value? And once you tell people they could look at it differently, they didn't, thought it was amazing. One of the things that often trips us up in agile transformations and in organizations really is that we think people are demanding and impatient. We think our bosses want more and they want it sooner. They don't really, they just want to know what's happening. Like here, actually, you know, Transport for Greater London, we're going to spend loads of money on signage, on upgrading tracks. We'd actually just spent a couple of £1,000s on signage because people just wanted to know when things were turning up. I'm getting behind, but other things that are really interesting, like perspectives on things. In the Western world, we think of hygiene as washing our hands with water and soap. We wash our bottoms with dry paper. That's weird. Why is that a thing? But that's just a social norm that has us behaving in certain ways. Another one, it's actually sort of proven that instead of some proper, real threat of punishment, like points on your driving license, a sad face will slow you down more with no real punishment. So things like these are ways of changing people's behaviors. In organizations, when we're transforming, we think big important problems like transformation need big expensive solutions, but actually it seems that there's a strange disproportionality at work, that in many areas of human problem solving we act in the opposite way. People react very badly towards big things. Hygiene as well, going back to hygiene, it's like washing our hands. We know that some things we should do some things, and these are the patterns in Sooner Safer Happier. I would say we know we should do some things that will get certain outcomes. Like when we're washing our hands, we don't go, well, I'm not going to wash my hands unless I know what this soap is going to kill. We'll know what it kills if we don't wash our hands, and we'll get poorly. So these are all these things about how we should use these patterns, and how we get people to work together. So how do we get people to actually adopt them? You know, they're waiting for a sign. What are the signs? Well, we do some of these things, and some of these things have been talked about tonight, actually. So we think about diverse thresholds. We often talk about the Everett Rogers diffusion of innovation curve. Cass Sunstein, also a co-author of Nudge, talks about it in sort of even more diverse thresholds of we've got people who really, really want to make change, and those are the 1s and the 2s and the 3s. And what we do is we bring them together in things like, well, like Zsolt was describing, in these social interactions like the community to practice or open spaces or internal conferences or meetup groups like this. And then the 2s can see the 1s, or the 3s can see the 2s, and they can be buoyed by how they're role modeling different ways of adopting new change and so on. So just get people together and they'll copy one another. Also, you know, in other sort of social interactions, in lean agile, we show our working out, like Andy was saying right at the beginning. You know, we show our working out, we show how things relate to one another, so that people can better understand their place in all of that, and also throw out their ideas. I threw in this one as well, this sort of this kintsugi, I think it's called, where through those social interactions we get these individuals and small groups, those precious people who will make change happen, that are scarce, and we sort of fix the organization by having those stick other groups of people together and go across these groups and so on. And what I would also say is that we often think ourselves as the norm. I go from place to place and they say, yeah, but we're different here, you know, or this is where things actually happen in certain ways. And there is no normal. Everywhere is there's no sort of template to it. Going back to some of those oh, I've lost my place now. I've fallen foul of the Petra Kucha. What I would say, that last one was about, those were some of the psychological things that were taking place just in these 20 slides. So that has only just scratched the surface. Happy to discuss any of those in terms of how they affect transformation. But again, what I would say is people's behavior will make it or break it. So really, really study how people behave. Oh, that was the clown's trousers, wasn't it? Thank you very much. Thank you. I hope that was a bit of fun. And any questions?
Thank you so much, everybody, and I hope you enjoyed. Any questions? Questions in the room first? Yes, there is a question there.
Thank you very much. I guess compared to a normal presentation, how did it feel doing 20 seconds per slide and other things that you would take into the workplace that you've learned from that?
Anybody want to take it? Any speakers? How does it feel? Tony, please.
I've done that exact same talk in 20 minutes, in 35 minutes, and now I've done it in 60. Main lesson is we waffle on too much.
Probably that's why they introduced the Petra Kucha. Talk too much, it could be covered. Anybody else wanna answer that? Any other speakers? How did you feel? No, thank you. Next question. Yes, Kate.
Hi, I've got one for Matt. Matt, do you have any examples of behavioral science within the teams that you've worked with, or things that have been effective? I know you touched on a couple already.
Sorry, I didn't catch all of that because the mic's a bit sensitive, I think. Examples of using behavioral economics and behavioral science in teams?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there are very simple things about, and it can sometimes be sort of deemed a bit Machiavellian, that you have some insight in manipulating people. What I would often say is, like the cognitive bias codex, and that has all of these cognitive biases. I often study that, sort of be kind to myself. Just because I study it doesn't mean to say I'm in control of any of that. They all affect me as much as they do anyone else. So the big game changer for me is that it allows you to try and understand that there are emotions under people's actions and there are emotions under people's thoughts, and they're not always in control of them. So what it really helps me do is, don't take things at face value, why people are doing certain things. It's to get underneath it and calm it down. But then there are other things that when you want to, put choices in front of people, there is like these funny little things where you can do some sort of anchoring, or put a notion in people's head about what they might choose, that seems like a really good idea, and then put it next to one that seems foolish, or and then they'll go for the good idea. And again, that might seem Machiavellian, but sometimes people struggle with making decisions, and we want to include them and want to feel like they've got agency, but they really don't want to make a decision. So if you're not getting anywhere, then give them these little sort of ploys to help them just maybe disagree, or maybe appear to agree and commit and crack on and things like that. But yeah, there are things like, we use it all the time. There are things like picture superiority, and if you visualize, you give people a better way of understanding what your problem is, and things like that. I sort of am in the early stages of a diagnosis of a neurodiversity, and getting to understand that, I'm starting to understand why I like Lean Agile, because it helps me connect with information in a way that I'm able to make a decision and feel comfortable with it. So sorry, there was a lot there, but yeah, you're probably already doing it. But there are just some, if you study the cognitive bias codex and things like that, it'll just help you understand what it is you're doing, and then you might make some better choices in doing some more as well. So that was a lot there. Did that make sense?
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kate. Next, yeah, couple of questions, Sarah.
So Tony, there's one for you that says,
That was a question about funding, and yes, per quota per year by initiative. We asked, despite me presenting a nice looking story about that, we are still a bit stuck in an annual process. So that's one we're still trying to break out of. We've experimented with quarterly approvals. My personal opinion is that it won't work, sort of ever, because we live in a country where you can't change your resourcing so quickly. Maybe it works in America where everyone's on 2 weeks notice and you can just kick them all out and start again every quarter, but it's never going to work in Europe. So the reality is it became theatre that, you can't really change the whole portfolio around on a dime. We're about to move to a model where majority of the funding is annual, but we will reserve a pot that allows a per initiative request to come in. Now, those initiatives, of course, aren't funded independently. They will be associated with one of the value streams. So really what you're doing is you're dialing up and down the funding an initiative like it's a standalone thing. But, people in their minds associate a certain value with it. So some budget comes with it, but the budget would be added into the relevant value stream. So when you look at a value stream over time, yes, we talk about them as stable, but they're never perfectly stable because investment appetite will change, go up and down. And so you see that each of the value streams will have this investment profile going up and down over time. And it's a good way to look at it also, even from a recruitment point of view, because when some of the early experiments, when we turned the lights on what a value stream's sort of resource forecast was, what they intended to do with that money, you found that unless they were basically going to hire everyone in the UK on a certain topic, they weren't going to be able to spend the money no matter what. There's logical constraints when you look at real money as opposed to the wooden dollars that projects represent. You can see, well, how are you going to spend that? Are you going to spend it effectively? Because you want to avoid those situations where, oh, we haven't spent the money, it's Q3, I better hurry up and get one of the tier ones in because they'll help us spend it quick. So there's a cost effectiveness thing that we can gain too out of looking at it in that value stream construct. But yes, we'll keep experimenting over the next couple of years to try and make that a leaner path for everyone. But it's never going to be easy, because it implies winners and losers when you're talking about money, because someone doesn't get to do what they want to do.
Okay, Tom had a question for any of the speakers. Tom says, a couple of you mentioned getting a really deep understanding of the problem by observing the work. Are there any good examples of how to do this?
I can cover it from the point of view of measurement. So having an understanding how long it actually takes to go from when we start working on it until it actually hits production. So I think the major difference is often teams are looking at just within their local context of, I'm working on it and it's done, and that stays within my Jira project, if it's Jira or anything, but then they're not going to be able to look at actually end to end. And often, as in the picture was, there's so many dependencies. It's never one team, it's team of teams. And we are talking about value streams. So if you look at, and another buzzword is topologies, if you look at what the topologies are within your organization, it's a good approach. So instead of looking at these are the 4 or 5 topologies we're gonna have in our organization, actually explore what are the topologies, and so how long it actually, what are the different handoffs and queues that it's going through, and then observing how the work is actually happens and hits production to the hands of the customer. If you unlock that, you can measure that, and that's what we do at Nationwide.
Zsolt, I've got another question for you, which is about invite over. Sanjeev's asked, when doing transformations, has bottom up worked better than top down, or is there a place for both approaches?
So it is invite at all levels, right? So it's invite individuals, not inflating it. And the example I gave, that when we created our product, which is dashboard of ways of working, that actually we invited consumers. So I never inflicted any industry measures as like measure lead time. Why would I measure lead time? What does it mean? What does lead time mean after? And what is flow? Why is it beneficial? Why are we doing this? So instead of, when we work with the data consumers, is like what would help you? What would help you to improve? So based on that discussion, it leads towards, this is what I'm using, this is why it is beneficial, and that's invitation, and that's gonna actually invite other people to start using it. So instead of me talking about it, it's the consumers talking about this as why they are using it, what's the benefit, and so it attracts other people.
Okay, that's it for questions online. Any more in the room?
Any other question, anybody? If not, then thank you so much. So this was our first ever hybrid. We're gonna do more. Hopefully you liked it. We're gonna have a survey. If it's a total failure, and we're still gonna run it again because that's a learning. So thank you, really, thank you so much. And especially people turned up here who could join us physically, proving as a social proof. That's the other thing, we are always looking at social proof. People are turned up, it's definitely more than a social proof. It's a social proof. 20 social proof at least, 20 is the number. So thank you so much, and we're gonna do this more. Thank you, bye.